Good morning. How you guys doing? Good. Sound lively, awake. I like it. That makes my job a lot easier whenever you guys talk back and engage. When you just sit there, it makes me wonder what's going on, what's clicking, what's not clicking, but I'm excited to get to share this morning. In the first page of the Bible, we are introduced to the main character of the whole story, who is God. And what we can tell in the first page is that God is mysteriously within a community. We see a God who is one person in three, one God in three, Father, Son, and Spirit. And God creates the heavens and the earth, and we see his Spirit hovering over the face of the deep. And New Testament writers later on will reflect back and say that it's actually through Jesus that everything was made. And so we're introduced to a God who's in community, who goes on to create a good world, and day after day, he describes each piece of creation as good until he creates man, and he looks at man as just one person, and he, for the first time, says that something is not good. And in chapter 2, he says this, "Then the Lord God said, 'It's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him.'" So in the creation story, we see a God who is in community, and we see him creating man for community as well. And then in the new creation that Jesus is bringing to the earth, we are also introduced to this concept of community. So Romans chapter 8, verse 29, "For God knew his people in advance and chose them to become like his Son, so that his Son would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters." And so we see that in new creation, we see the community, we see life happening in the context of community as well. So I share all of that in the introduction to say this, that here's what we can tell, is that God considers community essential. So that's what we know. We know that God considers community essential. What I wonder why do so many Christians consider optional something that God considers essential? Why do we sometimes consider optional something that God considers essential? There was a survey done by Barna a few years ago, and out of the Christians that they surveyed, 41% of them considered discipleship as an entirely private endeavor, which out of all of the available options, that was the most selected option available. So almost half of the Christian surveyed saw discipleship as an entirely private endeavor. Yet when we see in Acts chapter 2 how the church went about their business, so in Acts chapter 2, Jesus at this point has been resurrected. He has ascended back into heaven, and he's just sent his Spirit down to light the fire in the church. And then the writer of Acts, after he tells the story of Peter giving this sermon and then all of these people being saved that day on the spot, he gives a little description of what life was like in the church early on. And I want to look at just a couple pieces of that. So in Acts chapter 2, we're going to look at verse 42 and part of verse 46. It says this, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, and to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes." I wonder if 40% of the church would consider things like doctrine and prayer as optional as they consider fellowship. So why the discrepancy with community? Why do we know that certain things are yes, like that's important, those are essential, you've got to have good doctrine, you've got to have an understanding of the scriptures, prayer's like the lifeblood of relationship with God, but when it comes to community, that's for the extroverted people, like the people, that's who that's for. So regardless of where you fall on the extroverted, introverted spectrum, community is essential for human beings, not just a certain kind of human, okay? So we're going to start by looking at 4 obstacles to community. And the first of which is going to be insecurity. Insecurity. Something that community does really, really well is it exposes what's on the inside of us. If there is selfishness, if there is anger, if there is pride, if there is envy, in pride, you want to elevate yourself and push others down. And you may do that through gossip or slander. All of these things, whenever you're just in isolation and you're able to curate your world and your life, you can think that you're a pretty decent person because these things don't surface. But something about being in community brings these things to the surface. We recently got a dog. I was one of those people, you may be like this too, where I said, we will never have a dog, ever. And then my children started just really laying it on, okay, just nonstop. We've got to have a dog. For me to be whole, I've got to have this companion, just all the things. And I went from, I held out for a long time, but eventually I caved, okay? And we got a dog. And I also said, we will never have an inside dog. Okay, fine. We'll get a dog, but it's going to stay outside the whole time. But we made a mistake and we got it in winter. So the dog became an inside dog. And of course the kids in their sales pitch are like, don't worry, we'll take care of it. We'll feed it. We'll do all that. Yeah, you're laughing because okay? You've been there. This is something that I would have not chosen for myself, but I live in community with 5 other human beings under my roof. And this is not something I wanted, but I could tell it was something that they desired. And so we made it happen. And this dog is exposing the areas of my life that are not yet conformed into the image of Christ. This past week, the only redeemable thing out of this is going to be that it turns into great sermon material. But this past Thursday, my wife does an overnight thing where she went and with another group of women to pray over the women's conference, which is coming up next month. So she went and did that. So dad's flying solo. No big deal. I've done this before, but I've never done it with a dog, okay? So within 5 minutes of her leaving, the dog vomits on the rug. Thankfully, I was able to clean it up with also not throwing up myself. So we get that cleaned up, and then I spend pretty much the next couple hours trying to console a child who is emotionally distraught because I said no to a sleepover, while also trying to meet with one of my other kids to sit down. I try to do a weekly touch point check-in. Hey, how are you doing? What's going on? So I finally get to that check-in with one of my kids. We sit down. Within 5 minutes of that conversation, I hear some ruckus coming from the living room. And I walk in to see this rubber ball about this big that was filled with something that I could describe as maybe Elmer's glue, that between the child and the dog had been ripped open, and this stuff is slung all over the place and all over our dog, which is a long-haired dog, right before bedtime. And so now I thought just getting the kids bathed was a win and that I'm done with that for the night, but instead now we have this impromptu dog bath that we have to give, clean up. So once we got past all of our initial reactions, which weren't pretty, we came together as a team, we got it cleaned up and all of that. But that is in those moments, it's exposing certain things in me, because when the temperature gets turned up, certain things start to surface. And I realize that there are still areas in my life that are not yet Christ-like, okay? And again, whenever you're living just in isolation, you can go along and think that you don't actually have these problems, but you're just not being tested on them. And so that's something that community is great at. So if you want to stay safe, you can stay in isolation. Hide behind the insecurities that you have and keep people at arm's length. Never develop a deep relationship, because you can still keep your insecurities and the things about you that still need to be matured. You can have surface level connection with people and keep those under the radar. Oh yeah, like this is what you do for work, and how is your week? Hey, the Chiefs are in the championship game today. Praise God. Like you can talk like that and keep things at a certain level, but you can do that for a while, but it's not an effective long-term strategy. C.S. Lewis says this about being vulnerable. He said, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal." Lord help me. Wrap it carefully around with your hobbies and little luxuries. Do you know anyone that or maybe you yourself, this is how you deal with staying safe, is you just take your love and you wrap it carefully around with hobbies or little luxuries, and you avoid all entanglements. You lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, and motionless and airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. Keep it surface level to stay safe. But if you want to experience safety, keep it arm's length. If you want to experience love, you have to connect. You have to find yourself in community. Second obstacle that we face is individualism. Personal freedoms, personal responsibilities, these are good things. Like part of maturing is being able to stand on your own feet so that you can not just care for yourself, but also care for others. So that is a good thing, but also individualism can be taken to an extreme in which you're no longer just able to stand on yourself, but you become self-centered. Not just self-established, but self-centered. And as a society, we potentially live in the most individualistic society and culture of human history. This is the water that we swim in. It's kind of like a fish trying to realize the concept of water. Like, it's just the air that we breathe, living where we live in the time that we live in. We've moved culturally from having deep and real connections with a village or a tribe to, from there we went to a household where we still had connection and relationship with a wider connection of relationships. And then from the household, which was multi-generational, as well as people that were outside of your blood-related families, we moved from village to household to now nuclear family. And even now within the nuclear family, it's becoming even more isolated, where people, even within that unit, are becoming less and less connected. And so people may still engage in communities, but you engage in communities where you can kind of pick and choose. Where which community gives me the most benefit? And it's kind of viewed that way. What can I get? We shop for communities based on what they can give me. Previously, it was viewed the opposite, where what is it that I can give to my community? Now it's what can the community give to me? And all four of these obstacles that we're going to go over, they all start with the letter I for a reason. Because whenever we make ourselves the center, we will avoid community, and the effects of that are not great. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the cultures that score the highest in terms of individualism are also the countries and cultures that struggle the most with loneliness. So Mother Teresa made this observation. She said, "The greatest disease in the West today is not TB or leprosy. It's being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for. We can cure physical disease with medicine, but the only cure for loneliness, despair, and hopelessness is love. There are many in the world who are dying for a piece of bread, and there are many more who are dying for a little love. The poverty in the West is a different kind of poverty. It is not only a poverty of loneliness, but also of spirituality. There's a hunger for love, as there is a hunger for God. The third one, inconvenience. I used to wonder why, as a teenager and in college, I was constantly hanging out with people. Lots of friends, lots of spending time in community. And then I would look at adults and think, man, why don't they have as many friends as we do? Like, it's not going to be like that for me whenever I get older. And I used to wonder why the older that you got, it seemed that you had less and less connections. And now I know. Because you devote decades of your life to, if you're raising children, you devote a lot of your life to attending ball games and making sure they get to where they need to go, and you're trying to build them up and invest in them. And you're also trying to build your business or your career or all of these different things that are significant, heavy, demanding your attention. And so you wake up one day and you realize, wow, I have very little community around me. And you have a full schedule, full life, and the thought of working in something like community or friendships or relationships, just when you look at the list of things that are important, it often falls further down the list of things that need to get done, because this needs to get fixed, this phone call needs to get made. And so it moves on down the list. But community is essential. It's also inconvenient, and it's a limitation a lot of times. So as I mentioned before, I'm a husband, I'm a father to 4. Being a dad is a very limiting thing. It's a limitation. There are a lot of things I wish I could do that I don't do because I have children. Okay? I remember the days of being able to just move from, have the thought, hey, I need to go somewhere to get something. And you could have the thought and then take immediate action where you are in the vehicle and you're going where you need to go. And that was it. Or it was, man, I'm kind of tired. I think I'm just going to go to bed early tonight. You used to be able to do that. Okay? So community, and that's not just with parenting, but community comes with a limitation. And for a culture that places the self at the center of the universe, it doesn't compute. Why would anyone sacrifice their autonomy and their tastes and their preferences for the sake of something else or someone else? It doesn't make sense. And so to that, I would just say, yes, it could be viewed as a limitation, but also it could also be the means by which God brings liberty and liberation in me, in you, from our old selves. The old self that was selfish, proud, arrogant, self-centered. Being in community and experiencing the inconvenience, because here's the deal. Friends can be inconvenient at times. I don't know if you have these friends. Where it's, hey, I need help with something. Can you show up and help me? And as someone who is a bit of a planner, I already have the rest of that day scheduled. I already have the rest of my week. Every minute, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And so when these interruptions come up, it is an inconvenience. And that's what community looks like, is that in community, you're actually able to be inconvenienced. But whenever you keep community at just a distance, and you're able to pick and choose the moment that community starts to become inconvenient for you, you can just cut ties, move on to the next group, whatever. And because of that, you never sink down roots where you are. And in order for you to grow, you need to be rooted. The fourth thing that we're going to look at as an obstacle is idealism. Some people never find community because they are searching for the ideal group of people or the perfect church. The church or the group that fits your exact tastes and preferences. The music, they play the songs that you like. Your jams, you're looking for that place that's just right on the music selection, just right on the volume. The speaker is engaging, but not the shock jock where it's just like constant energy or whatever. Or maybe that is what you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for something more deep or more surface. Like all of these different things, we approach church, we approach community with like a consumer mindset where it's, hey, here's the list of things that I'm looking for, and we're in pursuit of the perfect or the ideal. And when you do that, you're just going to keep hopping from one place to the next because that doesn't exist. Stick around long enough anywhere and you're going to realize that no one is perfect. No place is perfect. And just as a quick aside, I want to say, though no church is perfect, I think we have a really good church. And we have a great church. And I want to say thank you for being okay for letting me be me. And, this year will be 4 years that I've been here as the campus pastor in Sherman. And throughout these 4 years, you guys have been amazing. You've been supportive. You have not tried to make me be someone who I'm not. And you weren't looking for the perfect pastor or the ideal thing. And so, I just wanted to say thank you and express the gratitude for that. Because something I heard recently that was really helpful, especially for someone who's a bit of an idealist, is ideals are like horizons. So the ideals are like the horizon line. It's great for determining a heading or a direction, but it's terrible as a destination. Okay, so if you're in pursuit of the horizon, that's great. It gives you a picture of the direction to head. But if you make your goal or your objective, your destination, the horizon, you are going to exhaust yourself because you're never actually going to reach it. And that's how ideals are. It's okay to have ideals. It moves us in the direction that we need to go. But if you consider ideals as the destination, you're going to exhaust yourself in that pursuit because it's not attainable. It's not reachable. We ache for community, but we also want to keep our options open, right? Where we take on the consumeristic mindset of I want to commit to this, but maybe there's a better group. Maybe there's some cooler people. Maybe there's some people that would be a better fit for me. And so I'm hesitant to commit because there may be something better out there. Community is not the product of perfection. It's the product of commitment. Okay? So what happens when we commit to community? Well, the first thing is we change. And that's the series that we're in. By the way, that was not an introduction. The way that just set up made it sound like an introduction. But we're in this series on how to change. And one of the ways that we change is through community. Let's look at Proverbs 13:20. It says this: walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. Community is one of the contexts in which we are transformed. The people that you hang out with, you start to become like. You watch what they watch. You read what they read. You listen to the music that they listen to. You vote like them. You think like them. Being in community shapes the person that we become. And in this proverb, it doesn't say that hang out, spend time with the wise, walk with the wise, and you'll get some good knowledge. You'll get something good. Now it says, walk with them and you'll become like them. Another way to express this is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Have you ever heard that saying? Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. We know this to be true with kids, where maybe it was your children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews. You You paid attention to the community that they were in, and you knew that, man, if they got in the wrong crowd, that is bad news, that you're fighting an uphill battle because some of those behaviors are going to rub off on your kid. And so you know that their friends shape their future, but this thing that we know to be true about the power of community doesn't change when you become an adult. You know, like we know with our kids, it's like, man, they need to be in good community because it's going to shape their decisions and their habits and all of that. That doesn't stop becoming true once you become an adult. It's still happening. This is a study that I've cited before, but it's still really interesting and on topic with this. In 2011, James Fowler and Nicholas Christakis, what a name, just by the way, Nicholas Christakis, they published a book on the power of social networks and the shaping of our lives. They used data from a longitudinal survey that spanned over 30 years, tons of people, tons of data. And here's what they found: that it's not just your friend that influences you. It's not just your friend, it's not just the friend of a friend that influences you, but that there is a measurable impact up to 3 degrees of separation. That a friend of a friend of a friend's behavior and habits and actions and lifestyle can actually shape and impact consistently and measurably you. And so, for example, one of the things that they showed was this. They took smoking, and they said if you had a friend that smokes, you were 61% more likely to become a smoker. If a friend of a friend smokes, you're 29% more likely to be a smoker. If a friend of a friend of a friend smokes, there was still a measurable impact of 11% more likely to be a smoker. And it wasn't just with this, it was with a variety of things, emotions, other habits as well. The point is this, is that we are social beings, and the communities that we're in affect us so much so that it's measurable up to 3 degrees out. So my question when reading that is like, so what happens when you get born again, you get set free, and you get set on fire for God? What happens? Well, your friend just became 62% more likely to also start following Jesus. You know, what happens whenever you experience breakthrough from poverty and you rise above that level? What happens whenever you have success in your family, in your parenting? Like, what ripple effect does that have whenever you're able to walk through grief without it completely crushing you and destroying you? What's the ripple effect of that? Well, when we're in community, the breakthrough that we experience is shared. It's not just our victory, but it's shared with those around us. Everything changes when you're in a relationship with Jesus. Everything. Look at this from Mark chapter 1. Jesus calling his disciples. So Mark chapter 1, verse 16 through 17. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Follow me, apprentice under me, be in relationship with me. And it's not that you will get something, you will become someone. So many people approach discipleship with Jesus in terms of what can they get. Jesus isn't concerned with that. It's not about what you get. This is not a transactional thing. We are accustomed to transactional relationships. You do this, I do that. With Jesus, it's formational. It's you follow me, you come into relationship with me, and it's not just that you're going to get something, it's that you're going to become something. You're going to become someone, the person that you were always meant to be. And this invitation into relationship isn't just an invitation into relationship with Jesus, but a relationship with others as well. Just a few verses later, we see Jesus also invite James and John to come and follow him. And so these people that Jesus is inviting into discipleship, it's not just, hey, it's just you and me. Like, just you and me have our own thing going. So many people have that mentality when it comes to their relationship with God. Just me and Jesus. Well, that's not how Jesus did it. Okay? Jesus invited them into a relationship with him and into a relationship with a wider community. And now Peter, Simon Peter, Andrew, James, John, these are all good Jewish Torah observant boys. Okay, so the area that they were from in Galilee, it was a hot spot for discipleship to a rabbi in first century Israel. But Jesus didn't just come to call the religious, he also came to call the sinners. So in Matthew chapter 9, a few verses that we're going to read here. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he arose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." So tax collectors were considered scumbags. They were despised. They were kind of like private subcontractors for the Roman government who were going around, and there's some good chuckles there. I didn't intend for that to be funny, but I guess it was. Okay, you must know some people. So they would often, Rome would find locals to go out and do the taxation for them because they were familiar with the economic activity of the area. And so sometimes Jews would, step into this position. And as a result of it, they were considered sellouts. Benedict Arnold type people, selling out their people for personal gain for the empire of Rome, who was their oppressor. And so they were excluded from temple worship because they were considered unclean. So they were excluded from temple worship, probably disowned by their families because of how shameful, in an honor-shame culture, for something like this to happen, their families would have most likely disowned them as well. And so these tax collectors and sinners, sinner was a term for non-Torah observant Jews, they may not have had a place in the temple to belong, but they had a place with Jesus. See, the requirement, the prerequisite to be at the table with Jesus wasn't righteousness. It was hunger. It wasn't once you have all of your stuff figured out and you're cleaned up, you can come be with me. It was, hey, if you're hungry, regardless of where you are, regardless of what you're walking through, if you're hungry, you have a seat at my table. What Jesus is doing as the teacher is school is in session right here, and he's trying to show them a lesson. And the lesson is this, that you belong before you believe, and you belong before you behave. This is something that we frequently say in our church, and it comes from what we see Jesus model. And so I wonder, what would it be like if ground zero for this next explosion of growth in the church, what if ground zero for this growth wasn't around a pulpit, but was around a table? Because it got kind of quiet there. Yeah. Anyway, there's a few jokes there, but here's what I know. I know that there are people in your life that would sit at your table in your house before they would ever sit in your row at church. You have opportunities to reach people, to connect with them, to show them the way of Jesus at your table long before they would ever consider stepping into a church. The competing worldviews against the Christian faith right now, they're not offering a more logical explanation of reality or truth or existence. What they're offering is a community to belong to. When Jesus comes and invites people into relationship with him, he's inviting them not just to believe certain things, adhere to certain things, he's inviting them into community. Look at this, Mark chapter 3. And he went up on the mountain and he called to them those whom he desired. And they came to him and he appointed the 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him. And he might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. He invited these 12 in so that they might be with him. Everything stems from just being with Jesus, belonging. It's a powerful thing. You belong before you believe. You belong before you behave. This was transformational for Matthew. I mean, he went from being an ostracized outsider to being one of the most well-known and famous evangelists in all of history, writing the account of the gospel that opens up the New Testament. This is written by someone who was excluded from temple worship because they were a tax collector. But because Jesus brought him in and said, you can sit at my table, you can be with me before you have your act together, Matthew was transformed. And because of it, we have, one of Jesus' most well-known, renowned teachings that we know as the Sermon on the Mount. And that teaching opens with this line: "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." That line was written by Matthew, in account of what Jesus taught. And I can tell you this, that long before Matthew ever heard that in a teaching, he saw it in the life of Jesus. Long before it was some slogan, he actually experienced it and saw it lived out and played out. And what happened as a result? Well, it transformed him. It had this ripple effect. This is why we have to push past our insecurities. This is why we have to put away individualism. This is why we have to get past our search for the perfect group. This is why we have to embrace the inconveniences that come with community and receive the community that God has given us. It might not be up to your standards, and that might be just why God has put it in your path. Community is transformational. It forms us. It shapes us. And so how do we do that here? This kind of community it's not centered around a pulpit. It's around a shared meal, a shared table, a shared life. That's how we practice it here. And it may look like groups. I mean, we're launching groups today, our next semester. And so it may look like jumping into a group. That's a great place. If you're not at that place yet, it may look like just reaching out and establishing some sort of rhythmic meeting with someone to sit over a shared meal, to share a coffee together, to move from being isolated and on your own into community. It may look like that today. So the encouragement here is not to find the ideal thing. It's to just do something. Engage in it in some way. And it may not be, right now at your stage of life, it may not be able, or you may not be able to engage in it to the degree that you want to. Just start somewhere. And as you get into it, as you step both feet in, you'll realize the benefit that community brings. So this is what we as a church are committed to. We are committed to worship, community, and serving. This is how we think that we are formed and shaped into the image of Jesus. And so as we continue to gather together, like the early church did, coming together to the temple to worship, we're going to keep doing that. It's an important rhythm in the life of the church, but so is community, gathering around the breaking of bread and a shared meal. And as you do this, the Lord will begin to shape you and reveal things to you that you would not have seen or experienced any other way. I couldn't make sense of the person that I've become without telling you about Jesus, but I also couldn't make sense of the person I've become without telling you about a long list of names of people that have been in my life, that have encouraged me, that have called me out when I needed to be called out, who have prayed for me, who have lifted me up whenever I couldn't lift myself up. Community is powerful, belonging is powerful. And so if you're new here, we want you to know that you belong before you believe, you belong before you behave. Why? Because that's how Jesus did it. Amen? Amen. Cool.